Thank you. We have done the coin toss in the back, and Claudette will open. Take your time, Claudette. I haven't introduced anybody else. I do want to introduce Susan Alvear and Harry Talbot, who will be our questioners. My role is simply as moderator. I will ensure that everything remains civil, cordial, on time. So let's get ready to rumble!
That's a little unnerving.
Always have to do that. Claudette, are you ready?
I am ready.
All right. Timer, are you ready?
Yep.
All right. You both know who your timer is down here where the signs are. All right. Very good. Claudette, please open.
Good morning. I'm Claudette Canola, and I'm ready to represent you in the State Senate because I believe in a strong and vibrant democracy. Like many of you, I'm tired of being shut out, of having no choice and no voice in the future of the Grand Valley. Like many of you, I'm tired of having a small, self-interested elite decide who should speak for all of us in Mesa County. With no effective opposition, a powerful and privileged few in our community have rigged the game for their own gain, and the quality of leadership has declined. The results are all around us. Our unemployment rate is still 6.9%, which is more than a full point higher than Denver, 2.5 points higher than Fort Collins, and almost 3% higher than Boulder. Why? Poor leadership. Instead of a healthy recovery, we've got a shrinking labor force, earning smaller wages. Worse yet, in recent times, the would-be public leaders chosen by our power brokers have, with alarming regularity, embarrassed themselves and us with their petty dishonesty, corruption, and self-dealing. Yet, Jared Wright, Steve King, Rex Tibbetts, Scott McGinnis, all products of the local power brokerage have fallen short of a fundamental standard of good leadership. My opponent is a career politician who makes his way by serving the interests of those who put him where he is. It's time for a new choice. I am determined to fight for good schools for our community, clean air and water, and also an affordable education that is available to all of our children. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudette. Ray Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thanks everybody for getting up this early. I hate to admit this to you, but if it was you, I wouldn't have got up. Just saying. I guess I'm kind of taken back just a little bit by some of the comments that my opponents made. I didn't realize we were running under a dictatorship in Mesa County. I'm a little confused by that, but I get the fact that there's a lot of frustration out there. But the frustration really should be pointed towards the party she represents. They are the ones that have put us $2 billion of debt over what we had 2 years ago. Somebody say Obamacare? Wow, that's a heck of a good program. The government that we have today, from the federal level to the state level, is basically controlled by Democrats. Are you better off today than we were just 6 years ago? I don't think so. We are taxed too much, and we spend too much. Now you're going to hear a whole lot of stuff today about programs and the wondrous things that we should be doing, but you're not going to hear how we're going to pay for them. We do not have a tax problem, we have a revenue problem, not a tax problem. And a spending problem. We spend too much in the state of Colorado. $2 billion a month is what we spend now. And I think that you're going to find, as you actually study what each one of us has done, the actual truth. I have a record, it's right here. You all can look it up. So don't be fooled by anything you might hear up here that is not true. You know who I am, I've done what I said I would do, and I will move forward and continue to do the right thing. Just to make the record clear, my name is Ray Scott. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Representative. And I'll go to questions. Susan Alvear, WPX, would you like to start?
Colorado higher education has been cut significantly since the beginning of the recession. Do you believe that the state should fund higher education, and if so, how do you propose doing that?
That's a great question.
She needs a mic so we can hear her.
Give us one.
I know.
Okay, I'm going to use my outside voice. Colorado higher education has been cut significantly since the beginning of the recession. Do you believe that the state should fund higher education, and if so, how do you propose doing that? Is that good?
Actually, higher education has been cut for longer than the recession. There are conflicting constitutional amendments in our Constitution. One requires us to increase K through 12 education over a period of time, and the other, the Tabor Amendment, says that we cannot pass any new taxes without a vote of the public. So K through 12 has been the benefit despite a shrinking budget, and in order to turn that around, we need to find new ways of financing public education, which I think includes public-private partnerships, which is being done frequently in universities like the University of Colorado and the School of Mines, partnering with high-tech companies and geology companies to get research dollars that really help fund the education system.
Thank you. Ray?
That's a great question, because I think we do have to continue to fund higher education. Other states have a great model. It's called severance tax. Works great, funds a lot of higher education programs, but you have to have the will to go get that severance tax. In Colorado, we don't have that will right now, so we have to look at other funding sources. Makes it much more difficult that way. You can go to other states, New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma, North Dakota, Wyoming, Utah. They've worked on that specific formula, and it's working for them.
All right. Claudette, 30 seconds.
In a rebuttal for that, I find that fascinating. Colorado does have a severance tax. It happens to be the lowest of any of the surrounding states, and the industry that my opponent has represented has fought against raising that particular severance tax from day one. I'm glad to hear that you'd like to see us go after severance taxes to support higher education. I think that's a great thing that we might be able to work on together.
Very good. Harry Talbot, second question.
Water is critical to everyone, and Colorado is in the process of developing a statewide water plan. What role do you believe the state Senate has in the development of the water plan? What are your greatest concerns regarding the state water plan?
Ray Scott first on the state water plan.
Well, first of all, it was the governor's water plan. I think we know that. The legislature was not involved in the water plan. Now, you probably heard of an incident, I guess it was last January, February, that Representative Coram and I believe Representative Sonnenberg and other representatives we had met with, Department of Natural Resources, and they basically told us, you're out. You have no input in the water plan. Well, we took a step and said, you know what, if we're not involved, see you later. The governor has now agreed with us, and we can thank us for that, by that. We are now involved in the water plan.
Claudette?
Again, it's an interesting perspective. The legislature losing my mic. The legislature actually set up in 2009 river basin roundtables, and the purpose of those roundtables was to get community input from the users of water about what threats they saw to their water, how they use their water, how they might react to the projected water shortages in 2050. And what grew out of those roundtable discussions was an executive order by Governor Hickenlooper to create a Colorado water plan. So there were numerous meetings with public involvement all across the state to talk about our water plan. And the result of that is going to the Colorado Water Board that will make recommendations to the legislature about bills to be passed. I'm looking forward to those recommendations because it's truly bottom-up, citizen-driven.
Thank you. Ray, 30 seconds.
Well, part of what we just discussed is true and part is not true. Yes, citizens were involved, but the state legislature, when you were believing that we're going to some mysterious plan was going to go floating into our desk, the governor was going to make the decision. End of conversation. There was not going to be any involvement past what he did with the roundtable. The roundtables were exactly why we had to stand up in the legislature and say no, because they were not being operated quickly enough, efficiently enough, and we needed to say in the water plans, and we had to protect western Colorado. You have no idea how fast they were attacking and moving our water.
Thank you. Susan, back to you with the microphone.
Yes, thank you. Fracking has become synonymous with all operations having to do with oil and gas development in Colorado. Efforts to drive traditional energy development out of Colorado have escalated, and investment in Colorado, particularly western Colorado, has declined, keeping the West Slope in a prolonged recession. If elected, what would you do to address this situation?
Let's see, who we're starting with?
I think it's
Claudette.
Okay, I'll
it
take
is
it.
water, right?
I'll take it. I'd like to reiterate the question. It is basically because fracking has become synonymous with drilling. There are people that are trying to shut down the industry and drive it out. Is that the gist of it? Well, I sort of reject that premise. I'm a Democrat. I've worked with environmental groups, and I don't know of any of them that don't understand that we all heat our homes and drive cars. We know that there needs to be, and we're sitting on a wonderful resource. So we know that we need to continue to develop that resource, but it needs to be done right. And unfortunately, fracking has become the stepchild of doing it wrong when there are lots of other things about drilling that may be as important to look at, as an example, cement failing on wells and those kinds of things. What I would do is listen carefully to all of the stakeholders, which includes industry. You cannot set good policy unless you talk to everybody.
Thank you. Ray?
Thank you. I find that interesting that you would say that, and now you are pro-fracking when your blogs are clearly anti-fracking. So I'm a little bit confused about how you can stand on the stage and tell this group that, well, gosh, I think fracking might be okay if the stakeholders are brought to the table. The bottom line is fracking has been proven to be safe. Over 1 million fracks have been done. This is not something we need to study again. It has been studied, it has been done, it has been tested. Millions of wells have been fracked with absolutely no negative impact.
430 wells fracked in Texas are now the cause of investigation because of arsenic in local well water. There are safe fracking fluids. They were developed by Halliburton. They're mandated for use offshore. They're sourced from food products. There are safe ways to do this. We just are not doing them safely.
All right, thank you. Barry Talbot, back to you for the final question.
Livestock production is the #1 agricultural product in western Colorado, and many of these producers rely on access to public lands to supplement private grazing allotments. Many federal resources management plans and environmental assessments have resulted in the reduction and/or elimination of grazing allotments on the west slope. The same is true regarding long-established trails on public lands and other access issues. What do you think the state's role should be in the management of these public lands?
Ray, you start.
Thank you. We have pushed a bill the last couple of years to turn over state lands to the state of Colorado for management. The data is clear that we can manage them better than the federal government.
Yes.
A lot of people get very confused about what the federal government can and cannot do based on the enabling acts back in the 1800s. They cannot operate in the state of Colorado without what's called an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding. Right now, those haven't been looked at since the early mid-70s, somewhere in that range. I've already proposed a bill that we sit down and we look at those MOUs, and we now start telling the government, the federal government, what they can do on our lands versus them telling us what they can do.
Well, let me first start by saying I come from a family of ranchers, and I understand the need to have access to public lands, particularly in the West, where the majority of our land is held in trust for all of the American people. I do think that the BLM goes through a very detailed process trying to find ways to make sure that all potential users are satisfied. And I think that the role that the state can play is to advocate on behalf of the statewide users, which includes everything from trout fishers to river rafters.
Thank you. Ray, 30 seconds.
I don't think you answered the question, so I'm going to let you take another shot.
You're yielding your 30, the balance of?
So you can give
Claudette,
another
if you
shot.
want it.
Well, I'll yield too. I don't know that I would add any more other
All right.
than it's a multiple use program, and the federal government is responsible for making sure that all stakeholders have access to and input into the process.
I didn't want to do this job again.
Ray, you yielded. I'm sorry, I have to stop. Thank you to our panelists for the questions. We now come to the exciting part and the unique part for the Club 20 debates, and a direct exchange between the candidates. Ray, you went second in the opening remarks. You may open on the cross-examination.
Oh, okay. Is this just one question, just so I understand?
This is a conversation. This is whatever you want to
Okay.
say or ask of your opponents.
One of the things that I find very interesting is that I read through your blogs a lot, which I know you appreciate that. But I find such conflict. When you come in front of a group, you talk about the fact that you're pro-Second Amendment, for example. But then when you're asked specifically whether or not you would vote yes or no on a gun bill, you can't answer that. Or you won't answer that. You stood here today and talked about fracking as if you really don't have a problem with fracking, but your blogs that you write say that you do. You protest against fracking. You're obviously very anti-oil and gas. We've had these conversations before in other debates. But yet you just will not come out and flat tell people that you do not want public land bothered with oil and gas production, or that you really don't want the gun laws changed. I would appreciate it if you would tell these folks exactly what you believe.
Well, I love the way that my opponent tries to put words in my mouth.